Melbourne house prices are tipped to rise the most out of any capital city over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years. These boom conditions last occurred about 80 years ago after the end of the World War. Australia had an acute housing shortage, it had record population growth, it had skilled labor shortage, it had low unemployment, and interest rates were falling. These 5 things. If that all sounds familiar, it's because that's the perfect storm that's occurring right now in 2025. House prices, including Melbourne, went up 3 times. That's 3x, 300% in the 6 years after the World War. Of course, I'm not saying that is going to happen right now to Australia or to Melbourne, but that was the quickest lift in property prices this country has ever seen. And I posit that because we're seeing the same forces unfold, it's almost impossible, bar a black swan event, for house prices to go down right now, including Melbourne, or even just rise at a slow pace. Especially if the major political parties implement their housing policies that I shared with you in a recent episode. All of that combined is starting to look like, I don't want to say it, but a property boom. Even the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, is now warning on a housing super cycle about to begin. The latest pricing, as you can see, from interest rate futures has the official cash rate falling to 2.9% by this year's end, suggesting another 5.25% rate cuts this calendar year. You can see how they're just dropping off. Now, these futures have been wrong, they get changed, but as of now, this is what the market expects. But more interesting than that is the RBA's board minutes, where they actually give qualitative reasoning and color around some of their decisions. They're expecting a housing boom. Historical experience, both in Australia and abroad, say the RBA, suggests that periods of lower interest rates can coincide with riskier borrowing activity. In other words, borrowing capacity increases, a rapid increase in house prices, and, at times, a relaxation of lending standards. We know that Peter Dutton, if elected, he wants to reduce the 3% interest rate buffer that banks assess you on versus what they actually charge you. If you're getting a 6% interest rate on your mortgage, they've actually assessed you at 9% just to make sure they have some wiggle room and some buffer. He wants to bring that rapidly down, which I'm not against, because that was only in there in the first place, that buffer, because we had record low interest rates during COVID. We don't anymore, so we don't need such a big buffer. Historically, borrowing by investors has been particularly sensitive to changes in conditions in the mortgage market. The potential for this activity to amplify credit and the housing market cycle would be monitored closely. Reading between the lines, they're saying if we reduce interest rates the amount that we need to, housing market is going to boom. Now, I wanted this episode to be predominantly about Melbourne, so let's look at the fastest ever 5-year growth period in different capital cities. Let's start with Sydney. So in October 1988, that 5-year period, house prices grew 80.7%. In Melbourne, it was actually bigger. Melbourne's typically known for not huge booms and busts, but more longer boom periods at a shallower rate. Like instead of 20% per annum like Perth just had, more like 8 to 10% per annum for a longer period of time. But its peak boom in a 5-year period, January 1989, where it went up 98.8%. That's a doubling in house price in just 5 years. You can see the other cities are very similar, Perth being the largest in September 2006. And I know a lot of you are probably thinking, hey PK, you're just making the market out to be more than it actually is because we've just had a huge boom during COVID. How can people afford another housing boom? All of the affordability metrics are way out of sync. It just can't happen. No, I'm not disagreeing with you, but the fact is, and I'm the only one saying this on YouTube and different podcasts, house values in Australia over the last 5 years in the supposed COVID boom have risen only 39%. If you extrapolate this out to 10 years, that would suggest that house prices have not even doubled from year 2020 to 2030. That is not boom conditions, because typically in Australia, housing market doubles every 7 to 10 years. over the last 80 years, that's been the historic reality. So in the last 5 years, even though it might seem like because of the media, because of so much more content out there, that we've experienced this massive housing boom, and we have increased house prices for sure, it has not been boom conditions when averaged over the last 5 years at the national level on average. Of course, Perth, different story. Other places, Adelaide, different story. Brisbane, different story. But on a national basis, especially Melbourne, which hasn't even grown more than 15%, there has been no boom. So there's plenty of latent capacity in these areas that have pulled the national average down. Now, I want you to watch this episode right till the end, because at the end, I'm going to share with you something that may pull the rug from underneath your investing plans, especially when it comes to Melbourne, because there's something going on that most people that even watch my channels will get affected by and will lose money. That's really important. I'm going to share what that is. But without further ado, let's do a little bit of a deep dive on Melbourne. Let's understand the most affordable areas that are primed for some of the best growth. Hear me loud and clear when I say that the affordable end of the Melbourne market is already growing at double digits per annum. Some of my clients, and of course non-clients as well, who get benefit from my platforms, have already bought in some places in Melbourne over the last 12 months and already made 10% plus capital growth. You can see on this chart where the opportunity exists. Where there's a lighter shade of yellow, for example, on the northern side here, around this number 1, on the western side, down the southwestern side, these are the affordable yellowy areas, cheaper areas, under $1 million, under $750,000. As you get these oranges and these darker maroons, those are the areas that are now above $1 million, above $2 million. So let's just ignore that, because that is not really investment worthy given atrocious yields. And also in this episode, I'm not going to go through number 2 and number 4 because they still have abundant land supply. I know a lot of buyers agents and other people big up Melton, and they say how parts of Melton South, let's say West Melton, etc., are actually got pretty good data, but you just need to draw a line from Melton right through to Melbourne CBD, and there's massive pockets in the middle where vacancy rates are more than 4%, more than 5%. So don't judge an area just based on its own geographic boundaries. You have to zoom out and say, all right, if people want to commute to the city, which we know they do for employment purposes, I mean, Melton in itself, it cannot support 100, 200, 300,000 population with self-sufficient employment opportunities and economic diversity. They have to travel to Melbourne CBD. Then why wouldn't they live closer when land is finally approved and built upon in these closer in areas with higher vacancy rates? So that's one of many reasons, which I might do in another episode, of why I'm staying clear of these areas for now. But number 1 and surrounds are really interesting to me. For example, a suburb, notorious as it may sound, called Broadmeadows. Now, according to PRD, Broadmeadows is about 6 or 7 o'clock on the property cycle. That means it's just recovering. If you ask me, it's already had a double-digit run-up, so it's more like at 7 to 8 o'clock. But this is an area that will continue to do well despite its stigma around crime and lower socioeconomic dynamics. We saw places like Armadale in Perth, we saw places like Petrie and Callinga in Brisbane, we saw places like Western Sydney in Sydney. There's examples all over Australia where areas that you and I may not want to actually live have gone up by double, triple, quadruple in a space of 10 to 15 years. That's because crime doesn't have any direct correlation to capital growth. But Broadmeadows is less than 15 kilometers from the Melbourne CBD. It's predominantly made up of 3-bedroom houses, with 2 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms being more rare. A 4-bedroom median price starts at $630, which I would argue now at an auctions is more like $700, but you can still get a 3-bedder for around $600,000 to $650,000. Its rental yield is 4.3%, so you gotta need to have some decent cash flow surplus on a monthly or yearly basis to be able to buy in a place like this. Vacancy rate is very low at 0.8%. One great thing, which I'll expand upon in a second, is that there's a lot of projects going around Broadmeadows. In fact, there are $190 million worth of projects going on. But in terms of freestanding houses, there's not much supply coming online. Less than 31 townhouses and less than 20 freestanding houses. The unemployment rate is huge. It's 15%, which is more than 3 times the national average. And this is one area that a lot of Melbourne is struggling with. Because of the way the state handled the whole COVID affair, a lot of commerce has been slowed down. There's a budget deficit. A lot of infrastructure has been postponed or cancelled, although there's still a healthy pipeline of that. There's been a mass exodus of population now that is finally reversing. So we want to watch that unemployment rate. We don't need it to come down to 4% for it to be investment worthy. We have to be very careful in a locality like this to be buying in only the best neighborhoods within that suburb, where within that specific neighborhood, inside Broadmeadows, the unemployment rate may be less than 7 or 6% with a higher owner-occupier ratio. Of course, there's lots of projects still in the pipeline for Melbourne, and the Melbourne Airport Rail Link, the railway works Southern Cross Station to Tullamarine, sponsored by predominantly the state government. That's a $10 billion project, and that's going to positively impact commute times and accessibility to the airport, which Broadmeadows is not too far away from, so it will get some positive side effects from that. Places like Broadmeadows and other affordable areas of Melbourne are positively humming with price pressure right now. I'm not saying go out and buy there with a blindfold on, nor am I saying that's the best strategy for anyone and everyone. Most of my clients aren't even considering it. There are many other locations in Melbourne that are perhaps better and lower risk, especially when it comes to townhouse locations under $700,000. But I want to warn you of something, and this is from the industry body Real Estate Buyers Association of Australia. I'm not a buyer's agent. You know how I feel about 95% of buyer's agents, which are just trash. But this is their own industry body warning of growing dangers to consumers from untrained buyer's agents entering the property market. And I can tell you right now, the majority of these people are in Melbourne. There's a huge immigrant community, of course, in the northwest of Sydney and also in the western suburbs of Melbourne. And I don't want to tarnish all of them, but the majority of them have become buyer's agents in just the last 1, 2, or 3 years. There's such an influx of investors, especially from the community, and because of advertisement, they are employing buyer's agents and getting done. Because those buyer's agents are inexperienced. Don't hear it from me. This is the industry body saying it themselves. They've raised concerns about the influx of poorly qualified representatives who may lack essential knowledge about property transactions. Sales agents have also expressed alarm over the issue, citing instances where inexperienced buyer's agents have failed clients. The REBA president attributed the problem to minimal entry requirements and insufficient specialist education in the industry. This is what I've been saying for like 7, 8, 9 years. Finally, the industry body of buyer's agents themselves is calling it out. If you're looking to hire a buyer's agent because you don't even have 3 to 5 hours a week over 1 or 2 months to learn and implement yourself through structured, systematic, data-led education with a mentor, i.e. me, cheeky plug there, then at least be educated enough to ask them the right questions. Why did you propose this property? And be able to verify the suburb property valuation, negotiation, due diligence reports. Be able to verify all this yourself independently. Don't trust them at all. Use them as expensive labor hire if you have no time or energy, but don't outsource the accountability, the responsibility, or the due diligence. Get educated, because no one cares about your money as much as you do. If you do want to level up, I'll leave links below to my free podcast, Oz Property Mastery with PK, and also my Facebook group with more than 60,000 people, Australian Property Mastery with PK, where you can start learning and verifying what I say, what others say, what 25 million property experts in Australia say for yourself using cold, hard data. Hit the subscribe button, give it a like. Thanks for being here, guys.